One of the things that I did was a director of education in London, and I was testing. I'm at their mercy. Okay, is that good? So as I said, I had been superintendent teacher in Windsor and director of education in London. And I've come here for meetings, so I got here this evening a bit early and just had the chance to walk along the riverfront and how beautiful it is, and just to see people out. So I'm excited to be here tonight, and I've done a number of these presentations, and I was just saying, how can you have an experience as Rome and not want to share it? So in about 45 minutes, I'm going to give you 30 days of Rome. I left Windsor to Detroit to Rome on September the 28th, and I returned on November the 1st. So when I woke up on November the 2nd, all my calendars were still literally on September. So we're going back, and that's the nice part of part 2, and I already have my plane ticket that again has me out for the entire month of October. So what I want to share with you this evening is the culture that we experienced and the methodology, as well as the product. And a lot of work that I'm doing right now is on the process of synodality, specifically the conversation in the spirit. And that's what I want to share with you. If you take anything away from tonight, that would be it. Because if it were not for the process, we would not have arrived at the product that we did at the end of 1 month.
The back can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, how's that? Ooh. Okay. So I arrived on a Friday evening, and on Saturday evening, the first thing that took place was an ecumenical vigil that was in St. Peter's Square. And it featured young people. One of the young women at the mic is a refugee from Syria. But what was most striking about that vigil was in his homily, Pope Francis left 8 minutes of silence. We're accustomed to maybe on Remembrance Day 2 minutes, which seems like forever. 8 minutes of silence, and it really was a prelude of what was to happen, and that this methodology that we were engaging in really requires that silence, that listening, that prayer. This was the theme of World Youth Day that had taken place in Portugal just a couple of months prior. And really it captures, so totus, 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 all, there is space for everyone, and when there isn't, please, let's work so that there is. So we had just arrived, just making our way through jet lag. It is now the Saturday evening, and we had just finished the vigil. It was a stand-up dinner. We now are all getting on buses and we're leaving Rome. And we went to a retreat center about an hour north of Rome in Sacrofano. And this truly set the stage for the work that we were about to encounter. The grounds were just absolutely magnificent. It was about 31 degrees, and people were complaining about the heat, but I'm from Windsor and I absolutely loved it. And really this was, if you would say, the theme that ran through the entire time that we were there with the synod. Without prayer, there will be no synod. It really was a month-long pilgrimage that we were engaging with. So we had 2 outstanding facilitators, Reverend Mother Angelini and Timothy Ratcliffe. Father Timothy's talks can be found on YouTube. Vatican News has them. Mother Angelini only spoke in Italian, and they are on, I believe they are posted, but they have not been translated. But these were the two facilitators that guided us for what would be 3 days in Sacrofano on retreat. So this was our format for the 3 days. So this was Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. The opening prayer, the meditation was 30 minutes, followed by an hour of silence. We were either in the church itself, or we could go outside. Again, another meditation, and another hour of silence. I was then introduced to Roman siesta, which meant we stopped at noon and we resumed at 4 o'clock. And that was through the whole time that we were in Rome. The conversation of the Spirit. So now for the first time, you had bishops, cardinals, and lay people. And none of us were really experienced with this conversation of the Spirit. So each of the 3 days in the afternoon, we now had an opportunity to use this methodology. And it was a great way for us now to get to know each other, also as we reflected on the meditations earlier in the day. Then we had Mass and dinner pretty well the whole time that I was there was at 8 o'clock at night. I'm used to going to bed at 8 o'clock, not eating dinner. So just highlighting the things that Father Timothy really focused on. Hope and against hope. This was the prayer of the organizing committee, the secretariat, because this had never been done in this way before. And really, whatever small deeds we do in this synod, that it will bear fruit beyond our imagination. And I think we're already seeing that happen. At home in God and God at home in us. Different cultures had different images of home. The one that really struck with us while we were over there is the image that Asia offered in terms of the person taking off his or her shoes to cross the threshold in terms of a sign of humility. Friendship. And I've used this last line quite a bit. And it was attributed to Pope John Paul II, that effective collegiality precedes effective collegiality. We had to become friends. So whatever work that you're doing in a parish, at a diocese level, you need to establish those friendships in order for the work to take place. And that is really what this retreat was doing. And when we're going back, it's going to be a reunion of sorts, and very, very glad to be back with those that we had journeyed with. And this is the conversation on the way to Emmaus. It really called us, if we really listen, our ready-made answers will evaporate. And when I share the methodology, you'll see that how often at meetings, and it couldn't be the only ones that I ran, but it's ping pong. Someone says something counter, and it just keeps going. This is not the format that we used. And so instead, a lot of times, we're listening to answer versus listening to truly understand what the other has said. And you'll see how we made this work. Authority, he had to address this one. So, okay, now we're giving more authority to the laity. Does that mean that the bishops, the cardinals, have less authority? He said, absolutely not. There's no competition between the two. And the best example that he could have provided was the four Gospels. There was no competition among the four Gospel writers. But because you have four accounts, you sort of have the complete 360, you have the complete story. And now with lay people involved, you're getting a greater picture of the whole story, and it was a wise move. Last year at this time, I had no idea I was going to Rome. They started hearing from all of the sessions that had taken place the importance of the lay voice. And so when they put out the call, it was two groups that they specifically wanted to hear from, and that was youth and women. But planning had gone on well before this time. So now it's the beginning of May and the announcement goes out. What they could have done, and what would have been the easiest in terms of planning and logistics, is say, okay, we've heard that we need lay people, we'll bring them to the second session. They didn't do that. They did the hard part, and they said, we're going to make room right now, and there was a lot of logistics that had to have been taken care of to make that possible. And they said, even though it was last minute, they weren't afraid that once we've heard this, to make the changes. And it's quite a lesson for all of us. And the spirit of truth, this I felt was sometimes, in terms of my role as a director, you know how we're always you're trying to plan everything out. And what this process is, let the process work, and the process works, and let us be guided by the Holy Spirit and not have everything planned out, because we don't know exactly where it's going if we listen to each other and to the Holy Spirit. So 3 days later, we're now bussed back into Rome, and we have a wonderful Mass. Again, it's taking place outside. The whole time that we were out there, it was 25, 27 degrees. I mean, it's a wonderful time to visit Rome in the month of October. So you can't see this from the back, but this is our month. So we had the ecumenical vigil, we had the retreat, we had the opening Mass. We had a module just on synodality, and then the three components: communion, mission, and participation. And then we were back with our home group in terms of the conclusion and the final steps. So for the synodal church and the steps, we were in the same groupings, and we were in language groupings, obviously, because to have that discussion, there wasn't translation for that part. And then 3 other groups. So I got to be part of literally 4 different tables, and I'll share with you later just how diverse they were and what a gift it was. So then that's now brings us to the end of October, and we have the concluding Mass on the Sunday, and then we were leaving Rome. This was phenomenal. The first time you're in St. Peter's, you close your eyes. You don't want to open your eyes for fear that you're dreaming all of this, but just how stunning this was. The liturgies were just amazing. The music, again, so very inspiring. This is proof that I was actually there. But again, now notice for the masses, the bishops are informal. And you'll see later when we were in the groups, that was not the case. So it was really, there was a comfort there in terms of our work together as clergy and as laity. It's a bit fuzzy. This is the family photo, plus 1 pope. So 364 of us, plus Pope Francis is 365. And these were the closest friends for the month of October. So this was Team Canada. We named ourselves affectionately Cardinal Lacroix from Quebec. Bishop McGrattan would be known to some of you. He was at the seminary, so he's now in Calgary. Bishop Poisson is in Quebec. Archbishop Miller in Vancouver. Bishop Pelchat, Quebec. Myself from London. Sister Chantal Demers has an interesting story. She works at a parish, but she also runs a karate school. So no one was messing with her. Sammy Anoon, a professor from Sherbrooke. The Middle East is his area of expertise. Catherine Clifford is a theologian teaching in St. Paul's in Ottawa. Father Gilles Roche is also a theologian. And Father Jean Vezina from the CCCB. So we had an opportunity about once a week we would get together and just for us now to become known to each other, and again it was just a wonderful group. So this is the entrance to Paul VI Audience Hall. So this was the badge that I had to have on me the whole time. Without that badge, I was not getting through those doors. They look friendly, they look really nice, but And in fact, one of the bishops had to get another bishop who they recognized to get them through when they had forgotten their badge. Again, just an impressive audience hall. If you see this in the background, so a lot of times in the winter, this is where the Pope would indeed have his audience versus outside. So this was the game changer, that for us, it was new, but for the cardinals and the bishops, equally new. Up until this year, that would have been on the on your left, what it looked like. And the bishop said, Linda, we would have got to know the people on our left, we would have got to talk to the people at our right, but that was about the extent of it. Versus the whole time, we were around 34 round tables. A round table does not have a head. Even during the plenary sessions, we were at round tables. We were never in theater style when we were part of the synod. The technology, and as I was coming in, impressed with the technology that you have here, this made it possible. So at the back of my badge was a QR code. When I came, the front of my badge had table 27, seat 11. So I had to find table 27, seat 11. When I got there, there was an iPad with my name on it. I had to take the back of my badge, which had a QR code, scan, and now all of the documents that I needed opened up. But it was also a sneaky way for them to take attendance. So they knew exactly at all times who of us was there and who wasn't. So everything was on the iPad that we needed. So in the middle, you'll see there was screens. So when we were working on our reports, we could just plug in our computer so that everybody around our table could see what we were working on. So there was 3 of those. There's the big screens when it got projected to the whole group in the room. And then the white on the table is a camera. So whenever you were talking, the camera would zoom on you, the mic would turn red, you're on every single screen and you're projecting to the entire room. Translation services was available to us, and people would speak in their language. So the languages were English, Spanish, Italian, and French. So at one point I had a German bishop next to me, and when English was your second language, it was a little bit more difficult, but everybody made it work. And you just realized what a gift you had to be able to facilitate in your first language. So this is the 34 small table groups that we were working on. And again, I was part of different groups for the different modules. So if you recall, it was October of 2021 when the sessions were being held, the listening sessions across the diocese. So what happened was, from your reports, I was then the co-chair with Father Paul. We then put together a diocesan report, and that's available on the website. From the diocesan report then went a provincial report, and I was asked if I would help coordinate that as well, and served as chair for that committee. From the provincial, then there was a Canadian report that summarized all of the provinces, and then there was a North American. So each continent, so there was 7 continental reports, and you're thinking, at least my thinking was, is this going to be like a game of telephone? That by the time the messages go up, it's going to get jumbled and marbled. And it was the exact opposite. The messages got amplified. The same messages kept coming through in all the reports, the very same themes. The brilliant part of what they did is, from that document, they then created what's called the Instrumentum Laboris, which was our working document, which had the questions that we were working on. This was then made known to everybody. There was no secret as to what the questions that we were working on. You can look it up on the internet right now, and you'll see the document and all of the questions. The brilliant part was our agenda was the questions in response to what we heard. It wasn't somebody else's idea. It was what the people across the globe, what were those issues, and these were the questions now to address those very issues. It took us a month, and it's going to take us another month coming. This is the methodology, and I'll share it a little bit more deeply, that I've been talking to, the conversation of the Spirit. And some of you in this room, through various meetings and that, have already experienced it. And it's the work that I'm doing. In fact, last week we did a session in Windsor, Essex, with pastors and principals, using the conversation of the Spirit. How do we work together after COVID in terms of as a parish, a school, and a family? And what came out of it, I think, was only possible because of this methodology. So again, these were the modules that we were working on. So each module, it took us about a week. That's why we were there about 5 weeks. So we started with the Mass at St. Peter's. We had theological input, we had spiritual input, and we had testimonials in terms of the topic that we were addressing. Then we were in our working groups through the conversation of the Spirit methodology. The working groups, all 34 groups, would report out to the larger group. So there was nothing that any group would have produced that all of us did not hear. So when it came to the final report, you could easily know whether or not this was something you heard, because we heard it all. Those were long days, but worthwhile days. And then here was, as an educator, this one I found really interesting and great wisdom. You always tell the kids that once they get feedback, now take that feedback and make whatever you're working on, that essay, even stronger. Sometimes they take your advice, sometimes they don't. Here, it's now Saturday morning, and I'm thinking, are we going to take the advice or not? So our task on Saturday morning, we had just listened to all of the other 33 groups who answered the same question that we were working on. And our assignment was, based on what you heard, is there anything now that you want to add to make your report stronger? We've been at this now for 5 days. We're working 5.5 days, and beautiful Rome is just on the outside. And I'm thinking, we're probably going to finish quickly. There was not one Saturday that we finished before 12:30, because what we heard from the other groups could make our document even stronger. Powerful testimony. So we had our homework. So the homework was the question that we were assigned. And in some of the modules, the questions veered a little bit in terms of the different areas of focus. With my experience, not working in a diocese, but working in a school board and working more as a partner, were more suited than somebody who was, like, let's say, clergy, intimately involved in something which I would not necessarily have knowledge of. So there was those nuances to get the various perspectives. So we had 4 minutes. Our assignment was, in 4 minutes, your answer to the question that was assigned. So this is the power of this methodology. We're at a round table, so anyone can start. So when the first person starts, after that, we go clockwise. So the first person has 4 minutes and everybody is listening. There's no debate. You then go to the next person and they have 4 minutes and you're listening. By the time we got halfway around the table, we would allow about 4 minutes of silence. What did we just hear? Just to take in what we had just heard. We know what we said, but everything that we had just heard. And we would follow that for the remainder of the table. Again, you know at meetings, it's, you know, you're going across, none of this. And that's the hardest part right now when I'm working with groups, that people want to say something in response. And we had a facilitator. There's no way that was going to happen, by the way, in our group. They made sure of that. So again, we took those 4 minutes, sometimes of silence. And then the second round, here's where the Holy Spirit really started to show itself. What we were asked to do now, and again, we had about 3-4 minutes, with what you just heard, what resonated, what really made your heart burn in terms of what you just heard. Not what you said, but what was heard. And now you started to see the convergences. And there were divergences too, where we had totally different experiences, and we captured that as well. But the first round, you're listening, and now what's coming to the surface. And in all the groups that I'm working with, by the second round, like I said, you're really getting some really neat insights, because you truly are having to listen to the others. The last one was now a little bit less structured in terms of, we now had to put a report together. So somebody was designated as the secretary, but we voted on who would be the rapporteur. So the rapporteur was going to be the one now that reported out to the group. I got selected for that for one of the conversations. So now what we had to do is, and we usually had about at least a half a day, sometimes a little bit more, we had to compile now our report in terms of what we heard, in terms of our answer to the question. And you had to do it in 4 minutes. I'll share with you later what happens when you go over 4 minutes. So before the report was submitted, we all had to agree that, and vote, did this report capture what we heard? And in every case, we had 100% of consensus on here. So on the days, these were tough days where you're listening to 34 other groups present. And it's exhausting. It goes back when I was with the school board, you're doing all day interviews because you want to make sure that you're giving everybody the time, but they're exhausting days. So as we're exhausted, the Pope is sitting at a round table taking notes. On the days that we reported out, he was there. He was hearing this firsthand. He wasn't going to read about it in a report. He wasn't able to join us because obviously he had other duties. But again, when those reports took place, every once in a while, about 20 minutes, there would again be just 4 minutes of silence and reflection and just taking in. And how many times do we have to do this after the meeting? Like the meeting ended before we really have time ourselves right now to really have that time for reflection. But this is really built into the process. So I was elected as rapporteur and delivering the final text. So on the screens and on your screen, it shows the listing. So it says, let's say I'm now third, so it says table 27, my name is on it. So then you go up one, you go up another one, and as soon as it's your turn, the mic in front of you turns red, the camera turns on you, and you are on every single screen in the entire room. You have 4 minutes now to deliver the text. At 4 minutes and 1, and 4 minutes of 2, 4 minutes of 3, the mic keeps going lower and lower. By 4 minutes and 5, the mic cut out. When it happened to a cardinal, the other cardinals probably got the biggest chuckle. But it didn't matter whether you were a cardinal, a bishop, or a layperson, you were not getting more than 4 minutes. And you can imagine that even if we went, like everybody went over a minute, like you're just adding a half hour on at a time, and we just didn't have that time. So it was clever and it worked very effectively. So you caught on quickly. you started speaking. If you're not done, you're speaking really fast by the end. And but anyways, it was, everybody did abide by the 4 minutes. And again, the key role of silence. So the synthesis report, so that we are now, so this is the draft. It is now the last week. So we started out the first week. We are now in the last week of October. It is the Wednesday. We have to have the final report approved by Saturday, because on Sunday is the final Mass, and on Monday we have tickets elsewhere, i.e. home. So on Wednesday, we get the document, the draft report. So we had teams of writers, theologians behind us who was putting all of this together. You can see what a monumental task that was. You got 34 groups, all submitting reports, five different areas. So on the Thursday, we had all day. So this was our day with our home group, so I'm now back with the group that I was originally, to any revisions or changes that we would like to see. A lot of them happened because the translation was rather poor. That somebody would have had the Italian text in front of us, and it sounded great in Italian. By the time it got transferred into English, not so much. So 34 tables working all day until 6:30 was the cutoff for submissions. By 6:30 on the Thursday evening, they had 1,251 submissions. Your first reaction is that these guys not agree on anything. And that wasn't the case at all, because it was just making the document stronger in terms of what was there. So then on the, comes now the interesting part. We are now at Saturday evening. So the final document gets worked on by Friday night. There's a final committee that's starting to work at 9 o'clock on Friday night. They worked until 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, the final document that was going to be shared with us was approved. It now had, they needed all morning, literally, from early morning until noon to do all the translation and get all the copies made. We got the report Saturday afternoon. They anticipated that we would get it sooner. So now, again, this was not planned, but just the wisdom in knowing and listening to the Holy Spirit. The criticism could have been that I'm voting on something that I had not had a chance to read, because we didn't get the final report now until Saturday afternoon, and we're voting on it 4 o'clock on Saturday evening. So we get in the room 4 o'clock on the Saturday evening. This was our last session. We were supposed to go until 8 o'clock. The first thing they do is they read 40 pages to us. And we're thinking, okay, forget dinner, breakfast, like we're never going to get out of here. Because it is now 7 o'clock. And all that we've done no votes yet. And all that we've done is heard the report. But nobody in the room could now say they did not know what was in the report, because it's in front of them and we just heard it read to us. So when the voting took place, this was interesting as well. So the final report is 20 chapters. Each chapter has about 10 paragraphs. So that's 200 paragraphs. We voted by paragraph. So we had to vote 200 times. It's 8 o'clock now on Saturday night, and we have to be done. But here was the ingenious part. So we had our iPads in front of us. We heard the document read to us. We saw it in front of us. So I would have had, for example, for the first one, and then paragraphs A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And I just had to go beside it, yes, no. So you had it in front of you. It took still a couple of hours, but that's how the voting took place. Now here is where the hoping against hope part comes in. If we as a group, 365 of us, if there was not 60% in terms of saying yes on a paragraph, the paragraph was out. And people would never know that it was ever in. And there was not one paragraph taken out, and the least number of votes was 80%. Most of them was in the high 90s. Because, and again, it's the process we used of listening, that what we were voting on was, did this accurately capture, in terms of what we had discussed, in terms of a month's worth of work. So those are the chapters. And I'm just going to take you very quickly through it. It's available on our diocesan website. The main themes for me were the conversation of the Spirit as a tool. And that's really where my work right now is, and with a lot of parishes or schools. The welcoming, listening, including, and pastorally accompanying. It was the one thing that we heard throughout, that how do we make sure that everybody feels welcome in our churches. The expanded role of women in ministry. So one of the paragraphs did talk about the possibility of women deacons. The expanded lay involvement, co-responsibility. I want to share with you something that's special here. Last June, a team of us from the diocese came up and interviewed the team here in terms of your co-responsible ministry, your leaders. We were so impressed in terms of what you have, in terms of that co-responsibility, that we had the opportunity this month, each diocese, to submit promising and inspiring practices directly to Rome. This practice from this parish is sitting in Rome. It may not yet be on the Pope's desk, but it's on someone's desk in Rome. But just how impressive the work that you're doing is, and it will inform others as well in terms of what does this co-responsibility, this lay involvement, in terms of clergy and lay working together look like. And you have a wonderful model here. The ongoing formation in synodality and mission in a digital environment. And I think what you've done here, just with the technology, now making available the possibility for someone who's not able to be here this evening to take part in it. And you don't want to use it all the time, but it also expands in terms of your reach. And for some who might not otherwise be able to join you, now have an opportunity. So again, the main theme, synodality, the conversation in the Spirit as a tool, that openness to listening to all, to welcoming, needing a way to involve the clergy. One of the comments that was made around the world was that it didn't seem that the clergy were really involved with those listening sessions. Well, they rectified that. At the beginning of May, they brought 365 clergy priests, parish priests from around the globe to that same retreat center that we were. And if you go online right now, you'll see some of the conversations that they had. All disciples, all missionaries, again, this is the work of everybody, not just a few elite who happened, to have specific training. This is all of the baptized, the work that you're doing in your workplaces, whatever it may be, and just recognizing the different gifts that everybody brings to the table. What are those responsibilities that bishops and clergy are doing that not necessarily is part of their ordained, but business functions or other functions that others can do? And the role of women in the church as well. Weaving bonds, we've presented to the seminary huge implications for how future priests are now going to be in terms of their training and their formation in synodality. And that ongoing formation, not just for them, but for the laity as well. And what are the possibilities for St. Peter's in terms of also training lay people, as well as the clergy? So every Friday evening when we were there, unfortunately what happened, as the world knows, October the 7th happened while we were over there. And some bishops had to leave right away because they were afraid. Well, they needed to be back home, but they were really afraid of what was there once the conflict broke out. So across the globe, the Pope had asked for prayers during that month of October. And every Friday night, there was a torchlight procession of the Rosary, where not just us, in terms of those who were involved with the Synod, but anyone who was in Rome could participate in it. And it was a powerful and extremely well attended. We had the Synod prayers also for migrants and refugees, led by the Pope. This Angels Unaware is just this powerful statue that's in St. Peter's, and that's where it took place. We had the days of prayer and fasting that were called upon for the entire church, and which we observed as well in Rome. This one I want to share with you. Further evidence that I was there. Sister Natalie is the General Secretary, so she had a huge role in this synod. Next to her is Wyatt. Wyatt got a lot of attention. Wyatt is the youngest synod participant. He's 18 or 19, from the University of Wyoming. He's a music education student. If I was still in the role of director, I would have hired him in a minute. The Pope made himself available to us before the sessions, very generous with his time. And so before Wyatt left the US, he wrote a letter. Didn't know whether this was going to work or there would be an opportunity. So one of the days before the session, the Pope was available for us to introduce ourselves to him, and Wyatt had the opportunity, and he presented the letter to the Pope. The letter says, "Dear professors, please excuse Wyatt from a month's worth of classes. Signed, Francis." He signed it. So he brought that letter back to the university, and just a wonderful opportunity to meet him and getting to know him. So this was my first group. So I'm just in Rome, and I find table 27, I find seat 11, and this is the group that I'm sharing that first round with. Quickly noticed, okay, I think I'm the only woman. I think I'm the only layperson. There's no other empty chair around the table. They could not have been more hospitable right from the outset. So the variety and the mix of this table was the same that I experienced in the other tables. So around this table, France, Malaysia, Sydney, Australia, Texas, Cameroon, Liverpool, Ethiopia, Singapore, Trinidad, Tobago, Bombay, Canada. That in itself, just to have, and I as an educator and as a director, I've had wonderful opportunities. Never like this in terms of meeting such a diversity. So Bishop Gordon is from Trinidad, Tobago. He's next to me. And I volunteered to visit him anytime, especially in the winter months. But we truly became friends, and there really wasn't a divide amongst us. This was one of the priests who was a facilitator on the left, one of the archbishops from Australia. Yes. So we just really became wonderful friends, and that was a gift. And then I had my moment. So at this time, the Pope is smiling. So somebody asked me, "What did you say?" I told him I was from Canada. The minute I said that, he smiled. We have such a positive reputation in Italy, in Rome, amongst the group. And he could not have been more hospitable. So how do you get these pictures? So there's a photographer that's just dedicated to the Pope. So all day, wherever the Pope goes, there's just all of these pictures. Then they post it, and then you can just purchase the pictures that you want. But there was no way that I was not getting this one. So this is where we lived. I had not been in residence before. This is the Sisters of Bambina, the Sisters of Charity. And so I had never been to Rome before, so jet lag and everything, and then I even got delayed heading over there, so I'm really tired. So the taxi drops me off, and I'm looking, and at the right-hand side is St. Peter's Square. On the left-hand side is this huge wall, and I'm going, okay, I know that I'm not there, but I couldn't see the door behind me, and this is how close we were. And I was fortunate to be one of the ones. So we got to be a community of about 40 of us, and we were divided. We were all around Rome. We were not too far. Some had to take buses in. You could have walked in. I don't think anybody had more than a 20-minute walk. But we were living in the residences, in this case, this convent, and they could not have been more hospitable. So the room was, you had the single bed, you had the desk. The gift was these beautiful open windows. So on the Friday that I got there, you're hearing these voices, and you hear this choir, and you think, where it's coming from. So what did everybody do? Well, we went to get up to the terrace, and what we saw was the kids who were practicing the choirs for the next day for the ecumenical vigil. And then you realize just how powerful this microphone system is in St. Peter's, because we heard it with such clarity. So this terrace is the terrace that ABC and NBC, when it comes to a papal election, will spend $20,000 a pop to have access to get their cameras on this, because that's the view. So literally, when you could see the Pope deliver the Angelus. He was kind of small, but he was still, but you could see him. And he was also on the big screens. But talk about when your next door neighbor is the Pope, from where you're living. So in summary, this was my experience. It was one of prayer, of listening, of silence, of reflection, of discernment, of friendship and dialogue, and just profound gratitude to have an experience that I never dreamed in retirement I would have. I have to share these with you. So the siesta, from noon until 4. So we were sitting all morning, and then we would be sitting another 4 hours. So I literally, every single lunch hour, went out for a 2-hour walk. You know that CBC show, Madly Off in All Directions? I just went every day in a different direction. And the gift of 2 hours in the middle of the day to discover Rome was just a gift. And then I still had 2 hours. Now, every lunch, I will admit, I happened to find a place that sold really great gelato. But this was, like, it's an outdoor museum. Like, how else do you describe Rome? And literally just walked the Trevi Fountain. The tourists were back, and I guess for the Jubilee year, everybody's saying it's just going to be crazy in terms of just the number of people who make the pilgrimage to Rome. So Rome is right now preparing for this Jubilee year, and it will be a bit busy. But I don't know whether there's more churches or restaurants in Rome, but you just went to the next block, and the next church was even more beautiful than the last one. And it's just stunning and they're free. You just walk in. The churches aren't allowed to charge. You can give a free will offering if you want, but and in each case, the reverence in each case and the silence in each case, as you're just taking in the art, just the magnificence. In the middle of the day, to experience the outdoor markets, which were a gift, the streets of Rome, the parks. So that's how I spent 2 hours of every lunch hour while I was in Rome. This is the Spanish Steps. And again, this October, I leave September 28th, and I come back October 28th, and it will be reunited. So the key role of prayer, that key role of listening, that key role of silence. And this is the question that we're leaving with people. In terms of what you just heard with respect to the conversation of the Spirit. So whatever group you're part of, what stood out for you? And then what opportunities might there to use that methodology with your committee, with your team? If I was still Director of Education during COVID, I would have used this if I'd have been smart enough, because we needed to know from each of the superintendents all of the things in terms of the implications of the next thing that we were asked to do. And you end up with these conversations where you knew that people weren't listening to each other, they were just waiting to answer. But this really forces people to listen to each other. And the power that comes from that and the wisdom is so very impressive. So that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. This is fascinating. I'm sure that there are questions. Please do not hesitate. Linda's here for a little bit
Yes.
longer. Feel free to ask. Take a few minutes to get up and circulate. But by all means, please ask your questions, and almost the hands are up already.
Thank you, Linda. Very, very entertaining, and also sort of brought me up to speed with how things happen there. What do you anticipate will happen this October? What do you have they given you a prelude of what to expect, or?
So what has happened, each diocese was asked, and that's why we submitted from this parish here, some promising practices in terms of what was specifically addressed. So all of the dioceses, and they're working on it right now, have submitted, we have, and specific working groups were established on some of the areas where you just needed more study. So this is all happening from last October to this October. So I would say two big things are going to happen. From everything that they're gathering, they're going to develop again this instrumentum laboris, the questions that we're going to address in terms of what they've now heard. This next report that comes out will be more action orientated. This one sort of laid the land in terms of, like, each report had, here's what we agreed on, the convergences, here's where areas of further studies, and here are some proposals. So the next step is what is going to be actionable in terms of now moving the church forward. So I anticipate that this final report will be more action orientated. The methodology, we're going to be 34 working groups, all mixed up again, the conversation of the Spirit methodology. So the methodology will be the same, but now we're getting in advance the work that's been done in the meantime. So, and a lot of work has been done. So if you recall, in October 2021, the logos just had Synod 2023. And then they realized, whoa, this is not going to be, we're not going to be able to do this in a year. And again, they were wise enough then to make it another year. So originally, we were just supposed to make one trip to Rome. Glad to make a second trip. Somebody asked, do you think that there will be a third or a fourth? And someone said, well, Vatican II, they kept coming back, and we're all going, we're open. But two for sure. And I think the final report will be a little bit more action orientated, and it goes to the Pope. So it's presented to him, and then what he does with it. Now, he will have heard the conversation that went on into it, but I anticipate there will be specific action that will come from it in terms of, because everybody recognized coming out of COVID, and if we don't do something, we're going to lose the church. There was a lot of people that we heard of that had left for one reason or another. How do we welcome them back? How do we make it a church that everybody feels welcome? And in the London diocese and in the province, the one thing that we heard, what kept people from coming back? If there was any inkling that they might be judged. And if they thought at all that they were going to be judged, they're not coming back. So how do we, in a non-judgmental way, invite people back that makes them feel comfortable and welcoming? And parishes are doing it. And we're going to hear even more examples, and it's happening. So thank you for that question.
You told us about the meeting, but you didn't really tell us the questions you were asked to answer.
So if you go on and just Google Instrumentum Laboris, there's a site that's just synod.va. It's the Vatican site of the Synod. The Instrumentum Laboris, I should have brought a copy with me, is posted there. And all of the questions for each of the modules are there. And they're going to do the same thing for this session and make it public as well. So that I had to sign a confidentiality agreement. The confidentiality agreement was that whatever we discussed at our round tables would not be shared, and that's fair. The final document and the reports that we submitted, that's fair, but not the conversations. So the media was not allowed for that, but there was no surprise in terms of what we were addressing because the questions were made available to everybody. Yes?
Did you find a lot of similarities between reports from the different dioceses across the globe?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The same themes kept emerging. And in fact, I was just with Father Paul Berlangeon in a meeting earlier today, and I hadn't looked at it for a while. We're doing another presentation with the trustees shortly. And we look back at the highlights of what our diocese put together. Yeah. The same themes kept emerging. Thank you.
Again, very nice presentation. Again, I'm trying to get my head around, on a given week, you answered 5 questions, I think, and then on Saturday, you did 4 questions.
We, during the week, there was one big question that we were working on. So I had the whole week.
Okay.
And the whole 365 of us were working on.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, the themes then were in that mission, communion, and participation. Those were the questions. We had breakups. If you go into the Instrumentum Laboris, that there's different versions, but all to the same question.
And Sunday was off, right?
Yep. Yep.
And siesta implies
That's what they told me. I think I was, so if you've been in Rome, or even in a hotel, I guess, and I didn't know this before, the custom is when you leave, you put your key in the front. So they know who's out and who's in. I was one of the few during the lunch hour, when I came back, that there was no other keys there, so I knew. But I have a background in, so I used to run marathons, so I have to be active. And so, yeah, it was a gift to me. Yes, I was told that. Yes?
I have a second question. You mentioned who sat around the table with you, all those various cultures and whatnot. Can you give examples of what you found were remarkable differences in culture and how they address, the whole Catholicism?
We had, I would say the biggest aha for me was just how similar we are. And we addressed it in the report. So the Mass is the Mass, but how do you include some of those elements that are key to your culture? And that's one of the things that the report is also going to address. So we really, like in Africa, they celebrate the Mass. And the other is how we complain if we have to drive more than 5 minutes. And the length of time that people, like in Africa and these communities, would come together, and it may be only once a month that they would have the luxury of being there with a priest, where they could actually have Mass. And I think for me, and then you heard of, there was one woman there from Russia, in terms of what it is like to be able to celebrate there. There was somebody else who had left the Ukraine. When you look around the world and the other experiences, like what a gift that we have here in Canada, and our problems, yeah, they're problems, but they're not the problems that some of these others are facing, and just how committed people are across the globe to their faith. And I think that was so inspiring, and to hear those different stories, and that was, for me, that was the gift. And so I was never at a table with somebody else from Canada. I can name drop. I was with Bishop Barron at one of the sessions. So you had all of these cardinals and you're just talking on an individual basis with them, and you just hear their story. That was probably the best, just exchanging what our experiences are in the various capacities. And I was one of the few that had, well, this is when I got asked every single time, when I'm basically saying that I was, I had 36 years in Catholic education, and that our students do not pay tuition. And it was like, say what? Can you say that again? No tuition? No, that's just not, nowhere else does that happen. I'm going out later to Victoria, to one of their dioceses, and again, they get some funding, but their parents are paying big dollars just to send them to a Catholic school, and what a gift that we have here. So it was truly just learning about each other and the friendships. So this is going to be one great big reunion. Leaving is going to be very, very difficult this time, because last time we sort of knew we were coming back. But this time we know that that's not going to happen, but the friendships will linger. And that, again, as Father Timothy said, that's the gift that we have. And so what he said at the beginning, that effective collegiality will lead to effective collegiality. We became friends, and we may not have agreed on all of the points, and we didn't. But we recognized what our differences are, and we put it out on the table.
Linda, you said something that really touched me and brought a lot of encouragement. When we started our journey 4 years ago to become a family of parishes, it was a journey that was done on Zoom, so certainly wasn't a very effective way to communicate. But we transitioned from that and decided that we would do our surveys, and of course the synod surveys came out as well. I'm sure most of us thought this is going nowhere. Nothing will ever get done. We're answering all these questions and it'll get put in a pile like every other survey. It was very encouraging to hear you say that the diocese read our surveys, read our questions, read our answers, and took our concerns very serious. So thank you. It really validates everything that we've been doing. And I know it's difficult for us sometimes to see that there's any progress. We still think that we're struggling as a family of parishes. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and we're not coming together. But we are. We really are. We've made an impression, and they are noticing us. So thank you to all of you. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much, because it's your voice that is helping us to become a very strong family of parishes in these diocese.
Okay, yes.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty here, to be honest with you, because I was in Rome in 1960. I was there when Vatican II was starting, and there was a lot of anticipation going on there. Where is the church heading? And to be quite frank with you, Rome was beautiful when I was there in the 60s. And you got a feeling of spirituality and holiness, and it was overwhelming. I went back in 2017, and that feeling wasn't there. So I've got to be perfectly truthful with you. I'm still very apprehensive of where we're heading here, quite frankly, because there was an anticipation that Vatican II would do something, and I don't know. I'm not so sure, where the success is. I think I get a feeling we're stumbling. I don't know, I just can't see it.
With this Pope, I think he's going to there's going to be some action. I think you'll see it.
What?
There'll be some action that's coming from this. I'm very confident of that. So we'll just have to see how it plays out, and we're all just trusting the Holy Spirit and the wisdom. Okay, thank you for sharing.